I am Chloe Holland, 38 years old, an Army officer. Last Sunday, my own sister shoved me so hard I went flying away from the dinner table. She didn't do it in the dark. She did it right in front of my mother and two of her friends, in the very house where I had bled $3,800 a month for 5 straight years to keep the lights on. My back hit the cold tile floor my father had laid with his own hands 20 years ago. No one helped me up. What I got instead was laughter. The whole table erupted in that cold, mocking sound, thrown at me like I had been stripped of every shred of dignity. I looked up. I stared directly at them. And I smiled. "Enjoy your meal," I said, standing up and smoothing my shirt. "This is your last free dinner." I pulled out my phone. One tap. Cold as pulling a trigger. By morning, 73 missed calls. Before I tell you what that tap did, take a second to like and subscribe and drop your location and local time in the comments. I always want to know where you're listening from. Now let me take you back 5 years. Back to the week I signed a mortgage that was never supposed to be mine. My father died on a Wednesday in October. He didn't go in a hospital bed surrounded by flowers. He went down in the front yard of our suburban home, his heart giving out while his hands were still white-knuckled around the steering wheel of his old riding mower. I was 50 miles away, mid-stride in a field training exercise, when the call came through. By the time I pulled my rusted Ford into the driveway, the paramedics were gone. Only the hum of the idling mower remained, chugging along until the tank ran dry. He left behind a jar of ashes, a widow who couldn't balance a checkbook, and a neon orange foreclosure notice taped to the front door. $187,000. That was the price of our entire history. 2 days after the funeral, we sat around the oak kitchen table. My mother, Lorraine, sat at the head, her eyes red and vacant. My sister, Carla, sat opposite me, scrolling her phone, her thumb clicking against the glass in a rhythm that made my jaw ache. Carla was 42, twice divorced, currently unemployed. Her credit score was a dumpster fire. My mother had no income. And eventually, every pair of eyes in that room landed on me. I was the officer, the one with the steady government paycheck, the one with the perfect credit score. "We're drowning, Chloe," my mother whispered. She didn't look at the bills. She looked at me. My military brain did what it was trained to do. I saw a squad in trouble. I saw a perimeter failing. I took the objective. I didn't realize then that in my family, being a soldier just meant being a target. The mortgage office was a miserable strip mall hole. Fluorescent lights humming, carpet smelling of old coffee. I sat across from a lone officer who looked like he hadn't seen sunlight since the 90s, a stack of papers sliding toward me across the desk. I hesitated. Then I felt it. My mother's hand clamped onto my forearm.
She didn't just hold me. She squeezed.
Her fingernails biting into my skin, leaving deep red crescents. "I promise, Chloe," she sobbed, the sound wet and jagged. "We'll all chip in. Carla will help. I just can't lose this house. I can't die anywhere else." I looked at the red marks on my arm. I looked at her tears. I took the pen. One signature, then another. I tied myself to $228,000 of debt, interest included. For the first 3 months, things worked. My mother sent her portion. Carla made noise about a job. Then the silence started. By the 4th month, the checks stopped coming. By the 5th, I was standing in a windswept training field, my face caked in dust and sweat, when my phone buzzed against my ribs. I pulled it out expecting a tactical update. It was a bank alert. An automatic withdrawal of $3,800. I stare at the screen as my checking account emptied. That money was my rent, my food, my future. My mother hadn't just used my credit. She had weaponized my loyalty. She knew I would never let the house fall. She knew I would bleed so they could sit on the porch and drink wine. $3,800 every single month for 60 months. Holland, get a move on. I snapped to attention, shoved the phone back in my pocket, and kept marching. I was a soldier, and soldiers know when they've been ambushed. 14 months into my sentence as the family bank, Carla came back. She didn't arrive with a plan. She arrived with 4 massive hard shell rollers and a designer handbag slung over her shoulder like a trophy. She'd finished her second divorce the way she finished everything, messy, broke, and looking for someone else to clean up the spill. Just for a few weeks, she told my mother. Just until I get my feet under me. A few weeks turned into months. Months measured in empty wine bottles and takeout containers from the Italian place downtown. Her clothes invaded the laundry room, the couch, every surface. And her financial contribution to the house she was living in? 0. Not a cent. Not even a thank you. I tried to talk to my mother. I went to her room, laid my bank statements on her bedspread. White paper, black ink, red numbers. I pointed to the utility spikes. I asked, as calmly as 5 years of military training would allow, when Carla was going to start carrying her own weight. Lorraine didn't even look at the numbers. Your sister is at rock bottom, Chloe. She just lost her marriage. She's grieving. Don't make this harder than it has to be. You have your army salary. You're fine. She was using Carla's failures as a leash to keep me in line. It was a shield, erected to protect the child she liked from the child she used. I was living like a ghost in my own life to keep that house standing. I'd given up my decent apartment, moved into a studio 40 miles from base, where the pipes bled rust every morning and the radiator clanked like a dying machine. Most nights I sat on a milk crate eating black beans and rice out of a plastic bowl. Every comfort, every hobby, every scrap of joy, stripped away to feed the machine back home. One Sunday, on a rare afternoon of leave, I drove to the house to pick up an old winter coat from the hall closet. I walked upstairs and reached for my childhood bedroom door. The knob didn't turn. There was a new lock set. Shiny brass. Sitting there like a middle finger in the center of the door. Carla hadn't just moved into my room. She had locked me out of it. I was the one paying the taxes, paying the insurance, eating beans on a milk crate so the lights stayed on. And there I was, standing in my own hallway, feeling like an intruder. If you've ever been the reliable one that everyone feels entitled to use, hit that like button right now. And drop locked out in the comments if a family member has ever crossed a line you thought was uncrossable. I read every single one. I didn't pound on the door. I didn't scream. I just stood there, hand hovering near that cold brass lock, and realized something with perfect clarity. I wasn't a daughter in this house. I wasn't a sister. I was an ATM with a pulse. I turned and walked back down the stairs. I didn't take my coat. I didn't say goodbye. I let the front door click shut behind me. The temporary arrangement was over. I just hadn't told them yet. My 38th birthday was November 21st. I woke at 0500. Checked my phone. Blank screen. No happy birthday from Lorraine. No love you sis from Carla. Not even a generic click. In the eyes of my blood, I had ceased to exist. My only function was a monthly direct deposit. Around 1400, my quartermaster sergeant, Margot, a hard-edged woman whose gaze could strip paint, walked past my desk without stopping. She slid a small plastic container onto the edge of my workspace. Inside was a grocery store cupcake with neon blue frosting and a small flickering candle in the shape of the number 8. "Welcome to the 38 Club, Holland," she rasped, patting my shoulder once, a heavy, honest strike, and kept walking. That was it. A colleague had remembered what my mother had traded for a mortgage payment. I took that cupcake to the last bathroom stall at the end of the hall. I locked the door, hit the hand dryer, let the mechanical roar fill the space. And under its cover, for exactly 4 minutes, I broke completely. I didn't just cry. I heaved, gasping over the sink, crying for the daughter who had signed her life away. Crying for the father who wasn't there to stop it. Crying for the lard frosting cupcake that was the only proof I was still alive. 4 minutes. That was all I allowed. When the dryer cut out, the silence was absolute. I splashed cold water on my face and looked at the officer in the mirror. Her eyes were bloodshot, but the haze was gone. The victim had died in that stall. The soldier had survived. That night, I drove to the old neighborhood in a cold drizzle and parked 20 yards down from the house. Every light was blazing. Several cars I didn't recognize were parked on my lawn. I opened Instagram. There was Carla's latest post, a video. Standing at the head of the oak table where my father used to sit, holding a glass of deep red wine, toasting a room full of people crammed into the dining room, using my mother's good china. The set I'd paid to have professionally moved and insured. To the single and free life, Carla yelled, her voice high and shrill. To a new beginning in a house that finally feels like home. She was celebrating her freedom. In a house built on my blood money. I didn't storm inside. You never attack until you've mapped the terrain. I watched the shadows move behind the curtains. Then I put the car in gear and drove back to my studio. I didn't turn on the lights. I sat at my small metal desk, opened my laptop, and typed 5 words into the search bar. Illinois property law.
Équitabilia.
I spent the next 6 hours reading case law, foreclosure procedures, fraud statutes. Every mortgage payment I'd made, every repair I'd funded, every signature I'd scratched into those bank documents. None of it was a gift. It was a weapon. As the Chicago skyline began to gray at the edges, I closed the laptop with a soft, final click. I wasn't a daughter anymore. I was a creditor. The next Saturday, I drove to the house under the pretense of checking a leak in the basement pipes. My mother was slumped in her recliner, a game show flickering across her face. She didn't look up when I walked in. I went straight for the kitchen. My eyes swept the counters like a thermal scan. Under a half-empty coffee mug, I found it, a crumpled Venmo ledger, coffee-stained. One recurring name, T. Ramos.
Plus $600.
The note, rent for March. While I was skipping meals to cover a $3,800 mortgage, Carla was pocketing $600 a month from a tenant, under the table, tax-free. I photographed the receipt. 3 clean shots. I walked upstairs. Still the shiny brass lock on my door. But this time, sitting on the threshold were a pair of scuffed brown leather work boots. Size 11. Caked in dried mud and fresh sawdust. The smell of someone who didn't belong. Carla hadn't just stolen my space. She'd rented out my childhood bedroom, the room where my father used to read to me for beer money. I photographed the boots. I photographed the lock. I photographed the trail of mud. She stood up slowly. "Don't call them family anymore, Holland," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "Family doesn't sell your bedroom to a stranger while you're out there eating dirt for them. This is theft. Plain and simple." She reached into her chest pocket and slid a matte black business card across the desk. Heavy paper. Silver lettering. "Call Patricia Holloway," Margot said. "She's not a regular lawyer. She's a wolf. And you're going to need a wolf to bite back against people who think they can eat your life and call it love." I picked up the card. The edges were sharp enough to draw blood. Patricia Holloway's office was on the 20th floor of a glass tower overlooking Lake Michigan. No family photos on her desk, no sentiment, just thick leather-bound statutes, a heavy brass paperweight, and coffee so black it looked like motor oil. She read the first 10 pages of my evidence folder in silence. Then she looked at the Venmo receipt, then the photo of the size 11 boots. A small, jagged smile pulled at the corner of her mouth. "They didn't just borrow your life, Officer Holland," she said. "They picked the bones clean. But generosity has a strict expiration date in this state. Yours ended 48 months ago." She laid out the plan on a yellow legal pad. Phase 1. Cut the cord. Stop every automatic payment.
Today.
Phase 2. A formal demand letter. 30 days for Lorraine to refinance. Pull my name off the deed. We both knew she couldn't. Phase 3. A partition lawsuit. Force a sale. I would get my equity back. She paused. Your credit score is going to drop 40 points. Maybe more. You ready for that? I'd walked through mortar fire. A credit score was a child's toy. Do it. Then my phone buzzed. A text from a number I hadn't seen in 2 years. Neil Briggs, Carla's ex-husband. 5 words. Thought you should know this. 1 attachment. A PDF. It was a financial affidavit Carla had filed with the county civil court just last month, part of her ongoing attempt to dodge child support. I scrolled to the income section. Under penalty of perjury, with her signature at the bottom, she had declared her total monthly income as exactly 0. I slid the phone across Patricia's desk without a word. She read it once, then twice. Then she started to laugh, a short, dry sound like dead leaves on concrete. 0, she whispered, while she's pocketing $600 a month from a tenant in your bedroom.
No taxes. No reporting.
She laced her fingers together. She didn't just lie to you, Chloe. She lied to a judge. She swore an oath to the state that she was destitute while running a black market boarding house on your dime. Patricia's eyes lit up with that predator's focus. This isn't just a civil dispute anymore. This is criminal fraud. This is perjury. I smoothed the front of my uniform. Draft the email, I said. Copy Carla. Copy my mother. Copy Neil's lawyers. Attach everything. You sure? Patricia asked, finger hovering over the keyboard. Once this goes, there's no calling it back. Scorched earth. I thought about the boots on my threshold. The cupcake with blue lard frosting. The laughter when I was lying on the kitchen floor. Send it. I want them to see it coming before the roof hits the floor. I walked out into the Chicago wind and started back to my car. The war was no longer in the shadows. That Sunday, I drove to the house, one last time. I brought cornbread, my father's recipe, butter and yellow cornmeal, not for them, but for the memory of the man who actually earned that roof. I set the tray on the counter. No one looked up. I was just a ghost delivering the mail. When we sat down, Carla was already performing. Head of the table, swirling an expensive Cabernet like she owned the world with 0 in her bank account. Next week, contractors are coming, she announced. We're ripping up the hardwood on the 2nd floor. I'm thinking wide plank, white oak. My voice was low and steady. With what money, Carla? The table went dead. She slammed her wine glass down so hard the red liquid splashed across the white tablecloth like a wound. You think because you write a few checks, you get to dictate how we live? You aren't the head of this house. You're just the help. You're the maid who happens to wear a uniform. I stood to get a glass of water. When I came back to the table, Carla was standing in my path, chin tilted up, blocking my chair. Sit down and shut up, Chloe. Nobody wants your attitude at dinner. I reached for the back of my chair. Her hands shot out. She planted both palms on my shoulders and shoved with everything she had. I wasn't expecting it. My boots slipped on the tile. I went down hard, my back hitting the floor my father had laid with his own hands. The impact knocked the wind out of me. Then came the sound. Laughter. Carla roared. Her friends joined in. The cackles echoed off the walls of the house I had bled for. They looked down at me like a broken toy. I looked at my mother. She wasn't laughing, but she wasn't moving either. She just watched. In that moment, every ounce of daughterly guilt evaporated. Every drop of loyalty turned to ash. I rolled onto my side and pushed myself up. I stood straight, squared my shoulders. Enjoy your meal, I said quietly. It's the last free one you'll ever have. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. The email was already drafted. The evidence, the lawsuit, the perjury filing, all of it queued up and waiting. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, or if you've been pushed to the edge by the very people you were trying to save, hit that like button right now. And comment down below if you've ever had to walk away from a toxic situation to save yourself. Your support keeps this story moving. I press send. One tap. cold as pulling a trigger. I walked out the front door and didn't look back. By 0600 the next morning, the damage assessment was in. 73 missed calls, 41 texts, 3 voicemails. Voicemail 1, Lorraine, thin, practiced, vibrating with rehearsed panic. Chloe, I think I'm having a heart attack. You can't do this. You're killing your mother. I took a sip of black coffee. Cold, bitter, just like the love she'd been selling me for $228,000. Voicemail 2, Carla, pure acid. You cold-blooded. You think a lawyer is going to scare me? I'll burn this house to the ground before I let you take it. You're dead to me. Voicemail 3, Carla again, 3:20 a.m., the bravado completely gone. Cracked, shrill, hovering at the edge of a breakdown. Neil called the lawyers. They're talking about jail. Please, we're family.
Just tell them it was a mistake.
Please, Chloe. I deleted all 3.
Clean sweep.
2 days later, Carla showed up at my base. She swerved past the visitor markers, lunged out of her car, hair tangled, mascara streaked across her face in jagged black lines. She saw me across the motor pool and started screaming before her boots hit the gravel. You have to stop this. Withdraw the filing. A dozen soldiers stopped what they were doing. Margot stepped out of the office, arms crossed, eyes like flint. I walked toward the perimeter line, measured and steady. Stopped 5 feet from her. This is a military installation, Carla, I said. You're trespassing. Back up. I don't care about your job, she screamed, face mottled and ugly. You're ruining Mom's life. You're putting me in a cage. Fix this now. I took 1 step closer. I gave this family 5 years, I said, loud enough for every person in that motor pool to hear. 60 months. $228,000 of my blood and my sweat. I carried this family until my back broke. And what did you give them, Carla? Besides lies. Besides a squatter in my childhood bedroom. Besides an affidavit swearing you were broke while pocketing rent money under the table. The silence that followed was absolute. The only sound was whined through the chain-link fence. Carla's mouth opened, then shut. She looked around at the soldiers, saw the disgust in their eyes, looked for a script, a pivot, a way to play the victim. There were no more scripts left. She backed away, then scrambled into her car, tires spitting gravel as she fled. I watched the dust settle, hands steady. Heart rate hadn't moved. Get back to work, I said. Thursday night at 8 p.m., my phone gave a slow, steady pulse. The name Mom glowed in the dark like a warning light. I picked it up and said nothing. Just waited. The silence on her end was jagged, filled with the ragged sound of an old woman's breathing. Patricia had delivered the legal packet that afternoon. 60 months of bank statements, highlighted in neon yellow. $228,000 of my life against Carla's grand total of 0. I leaned my head back against the cold plaster wall. There was no fire left in me anymore. Just a deep, hollow exhaustion that had settled into my marrow like lead. She was still doing it. Even with the evidence in her hands, she was using Carla's lies as a shield for her own cowardice. She wanted me to apologize for being right. She never sent a dime, Mom, I said. She never planned to. She was pocketing $600 a month from the stranger in my bedroom. You knew he was there. You walked past his muddy work boots every morning. You didn't just let her do it. You let her pimp out my childhood memories for beer money while I was skipping meals to pay for the roof over your head. I just wanted peace, she whimpered, tears starting on cue, predictable as the tide. I'm old. I'm sick. I'm your mother. No, I said. You wanted a bank account that didn't talk back. You chose the child who lied to you because she made you feel like a good mother. You punished the child who took care of you because I was a reminder of the bills you couldn't pay. You and Carla worked together to bleed me dry. But where will I go? She broke then, a jagged, ugly sound. They say the house has to be sold. You can't put your mother on the street. Not after everything I did for you. I looked at my packed bags in the corner of the room. I'm not putting you on the street, I said. You're going to sell the house. You'll take whatever equity remains, rent a small apartment you can afford on your Social Security check, and live within your means. Like everyone else. Without you, I won't survive it, she shrieked. You're my daughter. You owe me. I paid my debt, I said. In full. $228,000 times over. I'm not your bank anymore. And I'm not your maid. Don't call this number again. Chloe, wait. I pressed the red button. The line went dead. The silence that followed wasn't lonely. It was the sweetest thing I'd heard in 5 years. I went into my contacts, found her name, and hit block. Then I found Carla's and did the same. I sat back on my mattress and listened to the city roar. The umbilical cord was finally severed. Jagged. Bloody. But I was breathing my own air. The red brick house on the corner is someone else's nightmare now. It took 6 months for the fire sale to go through, just weeks before the bank was scheduled to padlock the front gate. Patricia used that perjury charge like a lead pipe, swinging it until Carla and Lorraine stopped screaming and started signing. The final check arrived in a plain white envelope. $87,000. Not the full $228,000 I'd bled into that bottomless pit, but in urban warfare, you take the win you can get. My credit score dropped 42 points the day the short sale finalized. I watched the notification pop up on my phone, swiped it into the trash, and went back to my drink. A 3-digit number couldn't tell me who I was anymore. Carla crawled into a roach-infested studio on the south side, waiting on a court date for fraud and perjury. Let her wait. Lorraine landed in a quiet mid-tier assisted living facility in the suburbs, clean, decent, and funded entirely by her own Social Security. Not a single cent of mine. I took my payout and put a down payment on a high-rise condo with floor-to-ceiling windows that look out over the marshland. No rust-stained water. No pipes groaning in the dark. No more milk crate. I threw out every piece of clothing that reminded me of that house. Every stained shirt, every worn-out pair of jeans I'd worn scrubbing their filth off baseboards, and I bought silk. I bought real wool. This morning I went down to the lobby cafe and ordered a double espresso. $7. I didn't open my banking app to calculate whether I could afford it. I just tapped my card and walked away. Friday night, the intercom buzzed. Margot. She didn't come over to ask for a loan or complain about a bill. She came with a bottle of Sauvignon Blanc so cold the glass sweated in the warm air of my kitchen. She sat on my new leather sofa and just breathed. Nice place, Holland, she said, her voice like gravel and old smoke. It's quiet, I replied. We sat there for 3 hours. We didn't talk about the lawsuit or the $87,000. We talked about the motor pool, the new recruits, the wind finally blowing in the right direction. I realized then that family isn't the group of people who share your blood. It's the people who wouldn't dream of bleeding you dry. Loyalty isn't something you owe because of a name on a birth certificate. It's something you earn with every action you take. Sunday afternoon came in on a pale winter sun. The marsh was still, a thin skin of ice over the tall grass. I stood in my clean, modern kitchen and pulled a tray of cornbread from the oven. Butter, honey, yellow cornmeal. My father's recipe. The grief didn't have teeth anymore. It was just a memory now, tucked away where it couldn't reach out and hurt me. I set the table for one. 1 white porcelain plate. 1 glass of cold water. No one was there to tell me I was selfish for wanting peace. No one was there to push my chair out from under me. No one was there to call me the help. The silence in the condo was absolute. Heavy. Perfect. I cut into the bread and listened to the sharp, dry crackle of the crust giving way to the soft, steaming center. I took a bite and looked out at the marsh as the light began to fade to deep purple. Pulling back wasn't about revenge. It was about survival. The war was over. I had my life back. And for the first time in 60 months, I was finally the only person I had to answer to.